Welcome to the Scottish Podcast by Scottish people about Scottish things. We're three lifelong friends and displaced Scotsmen who get together to talk about our homeland, the weird shit that happens there, and to remind us why we are the way we are. Welcome to This'll Do Nicely. Welcome to today's story with Rory. Today we're going to be talking about the Highland Games, and I have two experts on the topic with me today. I'm joined by Johnny, the Highland Flinger Naismith, and Chris, the Cable Crusher Irvin. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hello.
Do you like the Highland Games names I gave you?
Loved it, yeah.
Cable
like
Crusher.
I think
Cable Crusher sounds like I've had a wedgie, but but yeah.
Well, that's what you're known for.
I do like it. Yeah. No, I'll take it.
So tell me, Chris, when was the last time you tossed your own caber? I know you've got a young son in the house these days, so you probably don't get the chance to do it as much. But
my son is nearly 10 months old, so should we say what's 9 months plus 10 months? Just to be diplomatic, let's do that.
I mean, Johnny, you live by yourself, so you must be tossing your caber all over the place.
Literally just before this, actually. Just getting in the practice.
Yeah, I know, I get it. Well, all right, so I wanted to start you gents off with some Highland Games facts today. So
have you even told our millions of listeners that this is what we're going to do today? We're going to talk about you just went straight in for a masturbation joke, and you didn't even say what we were going to talk about.
It's going to be nothing but innuendo throughout the whole thing.
Today we're
going to talk about the topic.
Today we're going to talk about masturbation in Scotland. Say the scene, Rory. Jesus Christ.
Look, I mentioned it at least twice. It's fine. You're the caber crusher. Like, if they can't put two and two together, then I don't know what to tell you. Look, do you want these facts, these true facts, or not?
I just want you to set out what the subject is so that we can then put it in the description for episode 3, but you've just immediately gone for, something uncouth. And that's not what Scotland's about.
I strongly disagree. I spent the entirety of my life there, and it is very, very much about wanking.
Jesus Christ.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't mean to offend you. I apologise. Yeah, so we're talking about the Highland Games today. The Highland Games are basically the Scottish Olympics, is a nice way of describing it, I guess. It's a gathering of athletes and musicians, dancers, performers, artists. They compete and celebrate Highland traditions and culture. It's kind of like a fair or a farmer's market meets village fete meets, like I said, kind of like a local Olympics sports day thing, but is become much, much bigger than just the Highlands in Scotland, beyond Britain. It is now an entirely global affair where there are Highland Games literally all over the world. What do you guys know about the Highland Games? Have you ever been to one?
Yeah, I've been to a couple. When I was younger, there was a sort of park relatively near where the three of us lived, where there was a Parklands, if you guys remember, the country club up the road. There was a sort of hill where normally it was a couple of football pitches or soccer pitches for those less educated. But during that period, there was a Highland Games. I don't think it was every year. I think it was only a couple times. But yeah, I've been there. I've experienced it, but I get the impression that it was probably pretty tame compared to some of the other ones that are out there.
But yeah, I have a feeling the one in Parklands up the road from you might have been maybe a small one. Not saying it was any less important, just...
No, it felt less important. Definitely
less Highlands, for sure.
Yeah. Johnny, what about you? Have you been to?
I've been to some, I think, but so we used to holiday quite a lot in like further north in Scotland, like Aviemore and Carbridge and Nethybridge, and I know they have fairly regular ones. I mean, I don't remember a lot about them beyond the things that get the headlines, like tossing the caber, obviously. But I do. They sort of felt like a gathering of things, which was always quite nice, like the community coming together, and
Yeah, and I think that's what it a lot of it is. Like from reading about it, and personally, I don't remember actually ever going to one. I know about it, and I remember pretending to toss the caber when I was a wee boy, and putting the stone and all that type of stuff. But I don't think I was ever actually at a Highland Games, which seems weird considering like my family were pretty into the traditional stuff. My mum especially. I thought that would be something she'd be into, but it apparently not. But I mean, like, so from what I can read, it can be broken down into like 4 main sections. There's the athletic events, there's the music, there's the dancing, and then there's the what you're referring to, Johnny, the cultural celebration. And like, I think mainly we'll probably talk about the athletic events because the music, with the pipes, kind of go beyond the Highland Games, and I think we would probably eventually talk about Scottish music and pipes and all that type of stuff in its own show at some point. So I don't want to get into that too much. The dancing is probably the same thing. The dancing, it is unique to the Highland Games in the sense of like it's not a ceilidh, it's not Scottish country dancing, it is Highland dancing, and it's these days for a lot of people as important, if not more important, during the Highland Games. But I do think that's something we would want to probably talk about by itself as part of like a larger Scottish music or dancing.
The dancing is competitive at it, right? Like they compete.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's weird. Like one of my friends here in New York, I know her from Louisiana. She went to college with my partner, and we bonded basically over the fact that she'd gone to Scotland a few times to do Scottish dancing, to do Highland dancing, and she competes. We at least used to compete kind of all around America, in Ireland and Scotland. It's bizarre. Like
that's our next
like it is
guest appearance then when we talk about Scottish country dancing.
Yeah, I think if we're going to talk about it, we would need to have her on, genuinely.
Well, we are talking about it, so we've really missed an opportunity there.
we're just touching on it, Chris. It's different. It's all right.
All right.
But yeah, so I don't know how to like get into those two too much. The cultural celebration is kind of generic, it's like food and art and literal dog and pony shows. There's times where they have like car shows, and they have like they celebrate local artists, like I said, and all that type of stuff. Like that's fairly generic to country fairs and Renaissance fairs. I think they have here, that sort of thing. It's just kind of a celebration of everything Scottish, and it's things that we will eventually talk about on another episode. So the main things, like I said, the ones that are uniquely associated with the Highland Games are the athletic events, or the heavies as they're also known as. Do you guys know anything about the history of the games, or where they came from?
I know very little. I mean, I'm sure there's some history around fighting in armies and training, I can imagine. But I mean, beyond just what you see at them of like people throwing heavy things, that's about it, to be honest.
I think that's part of it. Like everybody not everybody, but like you can trace the history of, say, football or American football or rugby or anything else. But like the Highland Games and the heavies, the throwing events especially, are so, for want of a better word, basic, that it's like trying to trace the history of running or the long jump or something. It's definitely just one of those things like, there was a long time ago, centuries ago, like Jimmy was like, I bet you can't throw that stone further than I can. And then that's how like putting the stone turn up.
Isn't that a scene in Braveheart? Like we just
we found out that doesn't necessarily mean it happened in real life, though. So
I don't know. I mean, if we're going to have any sort of continuity in this podcast, I'm just saying that That's literally a scene in Braveheart where Mel Gibson's like, I don't think you can throw this over my head.
But I do think, like, to give them credit where credit's due, I do think that's where it came from, is just two probably drunk Scotsmen just trying to throw a stone further than the other one.
Isn't that where all the best games come from, though?
Right, exactly. And that's why, like, the history of it is related to a variety of different things. Like, there's one legend that King Malcolm III, in, like, the 11th century, he needed a messenger, and so he gathered all the best fighters and most athletic men from all the surrounding clans, and he said, like, whoever can run up the hill quickest, you will be my messenger. And it's just, I do think that's more of folklore, and to give it more gravitas than it actually is. I do think it's just over time. Like, you know, we all do the same thing as just wee boys. Like, we will just try and, if you get a big thing, we'll just try and beat the other person at throwing it far away or throwing it high or whatever else. Yeah, exactly. And I think
usually to ruin it for everybody else.
Yeah, eventually until somebody gets hurt and then has to go home crying. Yeah. And I there's an element of that in the Highland Games as well.
But are they? Maybe they still expose how little I know about them. Presumably, there's a mixture of like disciplines, right? Because there's the ones that get all the attention are like lifting, throwing, chucking stuff. But like presumably there's like races and things that happen as well, right?
Yeah, and I'll go into the details of the heavies, but yeah, you're right. There's bike races, there's running races, there's tug of war is a big thing. What else? There's like even kids events. There's like kids do sack races and wrestling. They do the hill run. There's axe throwing at certain events. All that type of stuff. It's all kind of it is that like gathering of the community, gathering of the culture, celebrating whatever the local culture is, and that's what's interesting. We'll probably talk about them later on, but like the American games or the French games or the German games, which are all Highland Games still, and they still do Highland Game events, but they just put their little cultural twist on. And that's, I think, what makes them interesting and what makes them so appealing to so many people. But yeah, I mean, like, just to give a little bit more background on the history, you know, they've been around for ages. Obviously, the events date back to essentially before history. The oldest games, I know that doesn't really make sense, but you know what I mean. The oldest games is in Circe Fife, which dates back to like 1314. And it was apparently, well, if you want to link it back to our last episode, this might be a slightly better one, but apparently one of the first recorded games, Highland Games, was after the Battle of Bannockburn, which is the battle that Robert the Bruce won during the Wars of Independence. So he basically was like, yeah, let's go and have the Highland Games in order to celebrate this victory.
Yeah, he just wanted a massive party that at some point when half the people there were hammered were like, I bet you can't throw a log past my can, and if you do, I'll challenge you to a tug of war, and if you can't do a tug of war, then I'll dance.
That, yes, I think that is as accurate as any other historical record. Like, that is genuinely what happened. So like that was the first one. That Highland Game still happens to this day, which I think is pretty cool. It's like the longest running one in the world right now. And then it had a bit of a resurgence after the Jacobite Rebellion, which is going to be, we'll eventually have to do an entire show on the Jacobite Rebellion because it really defines what we know Scotland to be today and the traditions that we hold and the patriotism that we hold, because I don't want to dig into it too much, but it was around, that was like Bonnie Prince Charlie, that was the Battle of Culloden, that then turned into essentially the Highland clearances. Tartan was banned for a while, bagpipes were banned for a while. It was very much like a blight on Scottish history. And then once those bans were lifted, people kind of came back with a vengeance, and tartan and pipes and anything Scottish became very fashionable in like the late 1700s, the early 1800s. And that's what kind of created this resurgence of the Highland Games, the more modern Highland Games as we know them to be. But we'll talk about the Jacobite Rebellion and Bonnie Prince Charlie at some point in the future, but that's where they became that. And then one of the interesting things I was reading about the history is they did apparently influence what would become the modern Olympics. Baron Pierre de Coubertin, I'm obviously mispronouncing his very French name, but
it's lovely.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm classically trained. But so apparently he was visiting the World's Fair in Paris in 1889, and he was so inspired by seeing the Highland Games there. So basically, like, it was part of what they would do. They would tour the Highland Games. The World's Fair would have a little event that would show off Scottish culture, and part of that was the Highland Games. Baron Pierre de Coubertin, he was so enamored by seeing the Highland Games at the Paris World Fair that he basically saw this event and was like, yeah, people can gather, they can do some sort of sporting events together. This is something that can work. He took then the idea of the ancient Olympics and then combined it with what he saw in the Paris World Fair and made what we consider as the modern Olympics. And then, like I'm going to talk about in a wee bit, like, you can see that certain events were taken directly from the Highland Games, specifically like the putt and the stone, or the shot put as we refer to it now.
But I can totally imagine the Scottish contingent turning up to the World's Fair, you know, badly signposted. They haven't brought any paper. They haven't printed anything. And this French guy comes
full
up.
of whiskey.
It's just a bunch. It's like 3 or 4 guys in a kilt just throwing stuff around because they're bored. And the French guy's like, this is unbelievable.
Never been south of Stirling.
This is unbelievable. What is this game? And the Scottish guys are like, aye, it's, right, what you do is you, right, you got a stone. You got a stone that's 4 pounds, and you put it on your shoulder, and you just chuck it. And whoever gets it wins. And then the other one is, you get a log, a tree, you get a tree, and you just chuck it. There seems to be a lot of chucking going on in this game. Well, listen, pal. You know, put your cigarette out and shut up and just watch us, because this is the future.
It's honestly, your grasp of history is one of the things that has just really surprised me and delighted me doing this podcast with you.
My teachers at school would be very proud of me.
I just love the idea that the Highland Games is effectively a very elaborate pub sport. It's like just looking around the room, going, "Oh, we should do darts next." That'll
I mean, seriously,
be
Johnny, it is. I mean, look at the main games. It's definitely a pub sport.
Yeah, chuck stuff, run around, dance. All right,
what we're going to do is, like, 5 of you guys and 5 of you guys get on the other side, and we're going to get a rope and we're going to tug it, and whoever gets it over this line, it gets the next round. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 100% just like ancient pub games. It's lasted for literally centuries and then spread around the world. It's honestly, it makes me kind of proud to be Scottish.
But we should talk about what the actual events are like when you talk about the heavy section, like what they actually are.
So the important, what are they called? Like the uniquely Highland Game events. So there are basically 8 of them. So I'll start with the hammer throw. The hammer throw is specifically the Scottish hammer throw, because there is a hammer throw in the Olympics and it's on a chain. The Scottish hammer throw is a weight on the end of a stick, kind of similar to a sledgehammer. You have to stand with your back to the trig. The trig's like the tow line, basically. It's the line that you're not able to go over. You have to stand completely still with your back to it. You swing the hammer around and then you chuck it as far as you can. That's basically it. I would recommend Googling it, because, like, YouTubing it, because it is, like, genuinely incredibly impressive. That is 2 events. So they do a lightweight and they do a heavyweight.
Is the lightweight done with just a small screwdriver?
Well, often it was translated into a welly, was it not, in school?
Yeah, I think we did the welly throw, right? The small weight is just a Black & Decker hammer.
Is it really? Is it seriously Black & Decker?
No, it's like 16 pounds. And then the heavy is like 22, like like a large terrier.
That's like one of my children.
Right, exactly. Wait, how many children do you have?
Well, he's 22 pounds, so
it is your child.
Yeah, we could just.
It's like
put him
standing.
Put him in a little helmet, and I guess
attach him to the end of a stick.
Yeah, and go for it.
Throw him as far as you can. Yeah,
exactly. He'd love it. He would love it.
He'd survive. He'd bounce. You know that.
Definitely survive.
So that's the hammer throw. Putting the stone, similar to the shot put or the heavy stone, there are, again, a light and a heavy with this. There's two ways of throwing this. There's the Braemar stone, which is a standing still throw. You can't move, you just have to throw it. It's one-handed from the shoulder. Like, basically the only rule is you have to keep it in the nape of the neck and then just launch it. The open throw is basically you can do whatever you want, but the only rule is you have to keep it in the nape of the neck.
So that's basically the modern day shot put.
Yeah, it's more similar to the modern day shot put, exactly. Again, it's one-handed, all that type of stuff. From what I was seeing, like the stone weights aren't actually standardized, which is a bit bizarre. They like vary between like 20 to 26 pound. Because I don't know, and I might be wrong with this, but it does seem that certain games, they basically just find a nearby stone that fits the bill, and are like, this is what we're throwing today.
Are you saying that they're winging amazing? It?
Very much so, yeah.
Very common theme emerging in this. And so are any of them known, like, is there certain games around Scotland that are known for being more challenging than others? Like, is there a sort of circuit of like, oh, I beat the Glasgow ones because that was the hard one or whatever?
No, because I don't think it differs that much. I do think it's a fairly... it's not like it's like a challenge to go to certain ones. It's more... you just do them all, and certain ones are more famous or more historical or whatever than others.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to go and find one that's like, oh, fuck, I can't even lift the stone. But we'll get onto that with the caber, because there's an interesting bit in the rules with that.
What if there's ever a sword in the stone? Are they able to throw that one?
It's a small stone. A 22 pound is really small. It would have to be a dagger.
Dagger in the stone.
Maybe like a butter knife or something.
Technicality.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you pull a butter knife from the stone, you might be...
King of Wales.
Able... Yeah. Ooh, shots fired.
I'm fired. King of Wales now, you see. I've taken a butter knife out of a stone. Isn't it?
Oh, man, we're going to get some shit from the
Welsh podcast raging.
Yeah, the Leakers Alone podcast. Oh man, copyright Rory Angus. Leakers Alone is amazing.
That was good.
All right, so the next event. So basically we've got like 2 stone events, 2 hammer events, and then you have the weight for distance. So again, you've got light and heavy for this. It is exactly what it says in the tin. You are chucking a weight as far away as possible.
But hang on, throw. Aren't you already doing that for the hammer throw and the other 2 events that you just?
It's just a different shaped weight, I think.
It's a different shape. Yeah, exactly.
It's just like a theme here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what is the shot put versus the javelin? You're just still throwing something far away. They're just a different shape.
Is this a javelin?
No. It's a weight on a small chain.
Right. Okay.
You don't have to keep it in your neck either.
Isn't there also one where they... I'm sure I've seen one where they have to throw it a different height. There's like a...
Yeah, we're getting onto that. Sorry. This is weight for distance, then we're going to get onto weight for height. So weight for distance is like... It's like a kettlebell. This looks like a kettlebell, basically. And you have it on like a wee chain, like 1 or 2 links. And then it's one-handed. This is the one where they spin round and then they chuck it as far as they can. And again, it's like £28 or £56. So it's the equivalent of throwing like an Irish Terrier or like an 8-year-old child, basically.
How many pounds did you say there? £50?
28 or 56.
I mean, how do you know how much an 8-year-old child weighs?
I'm guessing.
Right. Okay.
Throwing them distance.
I'm taking my weight, my age, and then dividing until I get to it.
Doesn't work that way. It's on one of those graphs that just kind of exponentially just goes up very quickly.
The moment you hit 30,
yeah,
just
the moment,
spikes,
moment you hit 30, you immediately hit 200 pounds, and then you're screwed for life.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm estimating these things, to be honest.
You're bunk science. This is why we're never going to get a coronavirus vaccine.
I wish I was in charge of that. Okay, so Johnny, on to your favorite event, the weight over bar, or weight for height, as it's also known, and that's basically where they do the one-handed throw. It's the same weight. There's no light or heavy with this. It's just like how high you can get it, and it's £56 that they're gonna throw over a bar. They can hit the bar just so long as it goes over and it doesn't knock the bar over.
I think this event is excellent because it's got like a slight danger factor where you're literally throwing this weight pretty much directly up the way, and then you have to move quite quickly.
This is the type of event that you do after you've had about 8 pints. The other events are all kind of leading up to this one.
Yeah, they're like 2 pint events. This is like towards the end of the night.
Can I throw this thing over a building? I've had 3 or 4 pints. I can do that, but this one's like, I really think I can. I think I've got great coordination and I can do this. And where have my trousers gone?
I cannot agree more. Like, if you watch this one, because they don't stand away from the bar as well. You have to get the maximum height. You have to basically stand underneath it. So there's that moment where it looks like it's just going to come down and hit them right in the head. It's terrifying, but amazing as well. Yeah. And they have to do a wee... It's nice because they have to do a wee swing at the beginning, and they swing it in between their legs. And they're all wearing... Because I never mentioned this, but during the Highland Games, and most of the official Highland Games, you have to wear a kilt to be a competitor. So they're all wearing kilts as well, and then just swinging this weight in between their legs, granny style, and then just throwing it what looks like just straight up in the air. It is impressive, but terrifying as well. But it's a fun one to watch. The record for that, in fact, is currently held by Halfor Bjornsson, also known as the Mountain from Game of Thrones. I don't know if you guys watched that, but he
the world's strongest man.
Exact. There's a lot of crossover between Highland Games and the World's Strongest Man, and he set the record recently and threw the 56-pound weight 19 and a half feet over the bar, which is hugely
Why can't
impressive.
he go do his own thing in Norway, like throw a reindeer 20 foot over a fjord? I mean, what's he doing coming and getting the Scottish Games?
He does that for training. Like the number, like that's how they keep the deer population under control. Is Bjornsson throwing them at fjords, and the poor things dying terribly painful deaths.
That's why they think Santa's real, because they see a reindeer flying through the air. Yeah, something to think about.
19 and a half feet above the ground.
Yeah. God bless your soul, Comet.
So then we get on to the final and probably the most famous event of the Highland Games, which is the caber toss. If you don't know what the caber toss is, it's basically like throwing a giant telephone pole. It is much like that. It is essentially a shaved tree, what they called, Johnny? Like a
trunk. Like a tree trunk.
Trunk, yeah. Thank you. Tree trunk. It's tapered. It's heavier at the top. And the aim of this particular game, like not game, but like event, is to flip it. It's not to get it as far as possible. what you want to do is have as what I'm going to call clean a flip as possible.
I didn't realize that. I thought it was to get it the furthest.
No. If you don't flip it, then you don't get the points, basically. But like, so right. you flip it, or you try and flip it, and if you flip it, then they basically score you on the time that it lands in. So 12 o'clock is perfect. 1 minute past 12, you're going to lose a point. 1 minute before 12, you're going to lose a point, and so on and so forth. I got this. I don't know if you guys can hear, but I've got dog barking in the background, literally 10 floors below. There's nothing I can do about it.
Because you were chucking potentially. It's because you were chucking in the air
it as far as possible.
You don't. Well, I had to. You don't live with a dog. What's going on?
I know it's outside. I'm gonna have to throw it very far away.
Huh. My dog. So I just want to say that my dog, who I live with, is not made a sound. So he's very well trained.
That's because he's the perfect little dog.
Yeah, that's why. He's been limping a lot right now. I think he's... Yeah, I'm going to have to caber toss him to the vet.
Is he okay, or is it just attention seeking?
It's both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it's a tapered log that they have to flip. You get points the closer you are to 12 o'clock. You get 3 attempts to do it. There's a general size and weight, which is around 19.5 feet. And then the weight is around 12.5 stone. But again, like, talking about pets, my cat's now trying to get into the other room. Give me a second.
Hopefully this all gets edited out. This is terrible.
This is all staying in.
I really thought we were going to take this thing seriously, but... see how it's going.
Nah, it's all staying in. People love it. All right, so they get 3 turns. You've got to try and flip it. The weight is 12.5 stone. The length is about 19.5 feet. But when you turn up at the day, it could differ. There's no trig, which means that there's no tow bar. There's no place that you have to throw it by, which means that when you watch it, like, guys can run around in circles all over the place with the caber before they get into a spot where they actually feel comfortable enough to flip it. It's genuinely like could you
run all the way to the finish line and then just drop it?
Well, there's no finish line. It's not. Line. It's all about getting it like over and in the right position. It's not about how far you get it.
All right.
So you can run for ages, and they have. Like, I've watched these videos of these men running in circles, running back and forth, and then eventually getting to a spot where they feel comfortable enough to try and flip it. And there's
also quite good for judges as a spectator, like a bit more excitement, right? When you're like,
yeah, exactly. Like, are they going to chuck a caber in my face? Yeah. Exactly. And like, you get judges in certain positions and blah blah blah. But like, the whole point is like, it's all about building up to the caber toss, and that's what I liked about. I think I mentioned it earlier, like the rules of it. When you read the rules, like the intricate rules of the Highland Games, they mention that the caber should be a length and weight beyond the powers of all but the best athletes to turn. So it's like the truly like this is it. This is the pinnacle. Like no like Tom, Dick, or Harry can come off the street and toss a caber. This has to be like the best of the best. And like when they get to this point, if they both hit 12 o'clock perfectly and the judges agree that that's what they do, they just split the pot. Like, there's no world record for the caber toss because you can't get better than 12 o'clock.
It's basically style points,
it's
right?
All about the day, exactly. And so that's what they talk about. Like, it's interesting because, like, how do you train for the caber toss? You can't, unless you live on like a ranch or a big farm or something, you don't have a caber in your back garden. It's a difficult thing to go out and train for day in, day out. They say that the difference between the American Highland Games and the Scottish Highland Games is like the frequency of the Scottish ones. It eventually, like, as much as like there's a depth of competitors in America, and like there's a lot of like people that are into being the weightlifters and being the strongest men and all that type of stuff. But in Scotland, because you're doing day-to-day competitions, it comes down to technique. Like you're exhausted after like doing 8 games back to back, and so it all comes down to who has the stamina and the technique. And that's more what the caber toss is. Obviously, you need to be like a strong guy, but like it's all about hitting that 12 o'clock, and you already have to be the best at everything else to get to it. I don't know. I just find it very interesting reading more about the caber toss, because again, it just seemed like we were talking about like a pub game that got, big, but now I like the idea of it. Like it's just like the true test of a man.
The best pub games get really elaborate, and the rules get very, very, very specific. So the caber toss, I maintain, is still a pub game, but it's just evolved to the point where, if you nail a really good pub game and you win it, then that level of satisfaction is very high. So the caber toss is definitely that.
Yeah, and that's part of it, is like it's the spectator side of it. That's why they build up to the caber toss as well, is because it's a spectacle to watch. It's so silly looking, but it's so impressive at the same time. Like these men running around carrying this telephone pole and then trying to flip it over. Like I like it. I liked it a lot. It made me appreciate it way more. So anyway, that's the events. That's the 8 main events. And like I said, there's other ones. Like one of the most popular ones in America, and it's also like translated over to Scotland as well, is the sheaf toss, which is basically using a pitchfork to chuck a sack of hay over a bar. But it's not one of the more traditional ones. That's why I'm kind of skipping over it a little bit. But the crowds love it.
Do people compete throughout them? Like, do they go in for an event, or are people going in to do all or a series of the things?
Yeah, I mean, like you get the same with so many other things. Like you've got guys that are really good at the hammer toss, and you got guys that are really good at like putting the stone. But like to be a good Highland Games competitor, you should have that like all-roundedness. You should be like the whatever it's going to be, the octathlete. Is that right? 8 of them. And so it tends to be, and it's all big guys. They're tend to be taller. They sit around 6 foot. And like I keep saying, guys, it's very, very popular with women, and is growing in popularity amongst women as well. Which is like brilliant. I was reading some article and then watching a couple of interviews of this one lady, Michelle Crowhart, who's like 62 and still looking to try and be like the first in the world, like take like the world championship and the world's Highland Games events. But like again, I'm referring to men a lot, but like they do tend to be bigger, they tend to be stronger and all that type of stuff. But a lot of it does come down to technique. It's just, I don't know. It got me way more interested in it than I ever have been in the past. Today, the games, there's about 60 of them in Scotland. There's about over 200 events worldwide. The most famous event is probably Braemar. That's the one that is attended by the Queen. It's been attended by royalty every year for the past, I think, basically since the 1800s.
That's the one when you always see the Queen and Prince Charles in the front row, both wearing kilts, slapping each other's legs, pretending that they're having a joke.
That is exactly it, yeah. She apparently loves the sack race and the caber toss.
I'd like to think that the most recent one, the two of them would just be having a good old joke about Prince Andrew and whether they need to get him out of the country quickly.
Like maybe toss him into the sea.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, look, that's it. That's the entirety of the games. And like, there's way more history. There's way more like insider baseball about it and all that type of stuff. Like for me, one of the best parts about it. So I started listening to a couple of podcasts about it. I've read a bunch about it, watched some YouTube videos, and it just seems really nice. And I know it sounds silly, but like the community sounds lovely. There was one of the podcasts, like I listened to a lot of Life Behind the Trig, which is a couple of like Scottish Highland Games competitors who decided to make the podcast because the games this year aren't happening because of COVID. And so they created the podcast, and it's just like listening to the Highland accent is just lovely.
It's a beautiful accent.
Like really nice men.
It's a beautiful accent.
It really is. And they were just talking about the fact, like, you know, if there's a bad lad who gets involved in the games, we root him out pretty quickly, you know, like we get rid of them because we don't like those types around. And it just seems very, very pleasant. But yeah, and it's also like it's growing a lot in America. I don't know if you guys did you read anything about like the American games or anything like that?
I read there's one big one in like the Appalachian Mountains or something, like in the Blue Ridge Mountains. That's one of the biggest abroad, but that's about as much as I know about it.
I'd like to interject here. I have done some research on it, and if you would just give me a minute to
you got facts.
I've got several facts to throw into the ring. So these are all from various different sources, and I will try and source them. The first one is from Scotland.org, which says that the first Highland Games in the US happened in 1836.
Wow.
And then the Caledonian Club of San Francisco held its first games in 1866 and boasts the oldest continuously running games in the USA. And apparently today, in addition to all the games across Scotland right now, there are more than 200 annual games and gatherings across the US and Canada.
Do you know where the first games in America were held?
I'm getting on that. I've got several other bits here. All right?
All right.
Bear with me.
If you're building up to
I've got this from the Finger Lakes Celtic Society or Celtic Society.
Probably Celtic.
Celtic, whatever. So they say, as Scots immigrated, tradition tells us that the games were held near Ellerby, North Carolina in the late 1700s, with most sources saying that the first games in the US were presented by Scottish immigrants living in Boston in 1853. Then there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on. In 1861, at least 3 other Caledonian clubs had joined Boston, including New York, Philadelphia, and Newark, New Jersey. The Civil War then prevented all that stuff, and it just kept growing from there. I'll just skip forward to some of the other stuff that... I guess I did a bit of research here. I get the 2 biggies, from what I can tell, are... There is one in North Carolina, which is the Grandfather Mountain Highland Games. Rory, I don't know if you came across that one at all. But that's apparently one of the biggest ones. They're usually held in July. Obviously, because of coronavirus, they weren't held this year. But it's apparently a very big game, and it was voted one of the sort of top 10 events in the Southeast United States.
Yeah, I think that's the one that's like literally they attract the most people. It's the Highland Games, because like Scotland, as much as like we have the history and the size of it, like we literally cannot fit that many people into our country.
Yeah.
Whereas,
so that's
like,
one, and then there's another one in Pleasanton, California, which is apparently the largest gathering and games in the Northern Hemisphere, which has been going on for 154 years. So I mean, the people in the US take this seriously.
Yeah, it does seem, because, and again, going back to the Jacobite rebellion and like the banning of like essentially everything that was traditionally Scottish, there was also part of that was people started getting kicked out of their houses and their land, and they traveled around the world, and so it was at this like kind of peak time of Scottish patriotism. People were traveling to America, they were traveling to France and to Germany and wherever else, and a lot of these people were from the Highlands because it was a part of the Highland clearances, and they took the games with them. And I think that's why it is so big around the world, but in such a niche way. It's interesting. It's odd that it's not become a bigger thing. Like there's no, I think, global governing body, but there's all these small events that grow up and have spontaneously been created around the country and around the world. And because of that, people kind of jump around to all these different events, and it becomes like a massive, like this really tight knit community.
Well, I've got an idea to globalize it and to modernize it, because I think the Highland Games, you've clearly pointed out that it was the basis for a lot of Olympic sports, old Olympics. The Greeks really did a number on us by getting the Olympics. But I think if we modernize the Highland Games, I've got various suggestions here, and I just want to run them past you.
You think it can be bigger than the Olympics?
I think if, you guys agree with 2 or 3 of these events, just to kind of get the ball rolling on it, then we can monetize it, and we can leave this podcast behind, and we can just, go and do our own thing with these events. So if you
well, can we become the modern version of wait, I'll find his name again, because I definitely didn't memorize it because it was too French to
Vince
memorize.
McMahon.
Wait.
We could be the Vince McMahon of
Baron
this.
Pierre de Coubertin.
You would just indulge me, because I think I've got the communications chops to really make this a big thing.
I'm sold already. I haven't even heard them yet.
So, look, we'll keep all the original events just for history's sake, and we can maybe combine that into one sort of octathlon, as you said, and we'll just make that one event on their own, okay? But I'm just going to run through these. You guys can say yay or nay. If you like them, they'll go into a new event. If you dislike them, fine. Well, they'll be tossed into the caber of history. So the first one I've got is tossing the waver, which is the caber toss, but it's in a giant wave pool.
Okay, I like it a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
That would be really nice with the kilts kind of like floating on top of the water as well.
Yeah, and I think you could probably get tartan.
I just think it'd be a nice
waders,
look
if you were a child, or they're called armbands in the UK. I think they're called waders here. I think that'd be quite tasteful. And it would be a time limit as well, because the wave machine would obviously go off after 5 minutes. It'd be really quite dramatic. The second one is called Fast Flash. So see how quickly you can flash someone in your kilt.
I mean, less competitive somehow. I'm just imagine it's going to happen anywhere.
It's like it's an after dark event, I suppose.
Can I suggest, instead of like how fast, like how many you can do in a certain time?
Yeah. I mean, I think you could probably do several intonations of it. One of them would be how quickly you could, like it's 100-meter dash, and then the other ones would be, distance.
Of course. Like how far away you can flash somebody.
Yeah, exactly. The other one, Rory, you're certainly familiar with this one. Pub golf. It's an endurance
Greatest
sport.
game ever invented.
Golf, obviously being a Scottish sport. Drinking, obviously, also being a Scottish sport. Then, you could 9 holes, 18 holes. You could do whatever you want with it. But I think people, the youngsters need to get involved.
Well, just real quick, give the very basic rules of pub golf, because it's an outstanding game. People deserve to know how to play it.
Yeah, well, the basic rules of pub golf are that you have 9 or 18 holes. The 18 holes are usually different pubs. They're different drinks, and you would have a par 3, a par 4, or a par 5. And you would...
depending on the drink. So if it's like a pint of Guinness, it'd be like a par 3.
Yeah, we're not advocating binge drinking here on this podcast. I'm just saying that if you do this, you have to be a professional drinker.
Drink responsibly.
Be a professional drinker that knows what they're doing, and maybe has their phone number written on their arm while they're doing it. Anyway, I'm going to move on. That one's not gone up that well. The next one is called
I love it. It's a great game.
Next one's called Fartin and Tartan. And that's...
I mean, you're done. You don't need to go any further.
You don't have to explain it. It's made
No, I really do. That's courtesy of my wife. She came up with that one. Who can make the tartan blow with their fart on the kilt without destroying it? Because that's key. You don't want to destroy the kilt there.
But it's so you have to fart, and then the tartan needs to wave a little bit.
Yeah, it's like biggest uplift, smallest amount of damage.
But it can't go too far in that it can't, it can be destroyed. It's like it's a delicacy.
I get it
in some ways.
Yeah. And I assume that there's like points deducted for skid marks or something along those lines.
Yeah. It's all about touch. Okay. It's a game of touch. It's lovely. It's quite tasteful. We've also got train spotting, which is exactly the same as looking at trains, but you're on heroin.
Okay.
And the first, just for the film Train Spotting, where it's all about drugs. So the first to correctly identify 5 trains while on heroin wins.
So drug testing is the opposite way for that sport, whereas like you need to make sure you have enough drugs in your system.
I would imagine that the Train Spotting event would be very niche, and you wouldn't want to enter into any of the other sports, which would be strictly anti-drugs. This would be like snowboarding in the Winter Olympics. They're on almost exactly the same drugs there.
It would at least have to be the last event. If you're doing all of them, then you don't want to start with train spotting.
Or it could be like one of those Olympic events where you do it 2 weeks before the actual Olympics and then you get into the real thing. Like the BMXing, no one cares about that. Just go do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
The real niche ones.
I've got 2 more. Alexander Graham Hell, which is where you have to sit in a room with a Scottish person telling you about how they invented everything until you can't take it anymore.
That's good.
That doesn't make any sense because everybody loves those conversations.
Yeah, well, so again, that's an endurance sport right there.
Was that one also invented by your wife by any chance?
No, I invented that one. That was me.
It's very self-referential, yeah.
And
self-deprecating.
But I mean, I used her as inspiration. And then the last one is Pug of War, where it's the same as Tug of War, but you have a pug and you have to drag it across. Until you win or a pug gets torn to shreds.
You're so proud of yourself with that one.
Never seen you look so happy about a joke.
I've just got I've got the pug's eyes just in my head.
We're gonna get. We haven't even made it on the air yet, and we're gonna get taken off.
The chew toy between them, that's amazing. I mean, look, I can't not greenlight every single one of them. The train spotting one's going to be difficult to get past the...
Train spotting is going to be an absolute nightmare to get sponsors.
Yeah, but like, it might be one of the underground ones, one of the street events, but I still really like it.
What's your favourite? Is it Fartin and Tartan?
Fartin and Tartan is just an outstanding name. Like, it really is. Pug of War is up there as well. I don't know. There's a lot of good ones there. Johnny, do you think you would eventually honestly, reading about this, getting into this a little bit, it kind of made me feel like I would want to just turn up at a Highland Games event and start like trying them, just have a go at it. Like,
oh man, my memory. So I'm similar to you. Like, I think I've only been to maybe 1 or 2, if any, and like I think they've been quite small scale ones, and you still find yourself being like, oh, I kind of want to give that a go. and actually, I think that's the joy of them, is like they are sort of these community events that are very welcoming of people, and actually they're more about like a celebration of getting together than very serious competition. So like I think there's something quite nice about everyone being like, oh, I think I could probably do a bit of that, which is kind of nice, I think.
Yeah, it seems like there's certain events where you can just turn up and they will literally just pull you out of the crowd and be like, you want to give it a go, you want to throw this thing far away, and let you do it. And like, it seems like if you want to get involved, it's pretty easy to do. Like, you can just turn up to a local event, you can give it a go, you can ask them like, all right, how do I get involved? Like, there's so many of them around Scotland, around America, around the world, that it's just like a case of, like I said, turning up and getting into it. But I guess what I would just say, we're at the point where we're probably wrapping up, but I would just say, like, if you want to get involved in it, or maybe learn a little bit more, I would definitely listen to that Life Behind the Trig podcast. Honestly, just listen to it before you go to sleep and just listen to the nice accents of the Highlanders. Also, Netflix have just released a new show called Home Game. And there's an episode on the Highland Games as well. It's like the second episode, I think, which was nice. It was fun to watch. It's got one of the guys from Life Behind the Trig as well. So I think there's a lot of different...
Have you got shares in Life Behind the Trig or something? I mean...
I just really liked it. Like, it was one of those things I was like, oh, I'll just get some information from it. And then I found myself listening to like every episode. They're just...
Why don't you go join their podcast?
Are you trying to get on there or something? Yeah.
No, because it would just be about Highland Games, and I don't know enough about it, unfortunately. I'm not...
Should have got them on.
6 foot something.
I actually emailed one of the American Scottish Societies asking if they would give us some questions or answer some questions for us, and didn't hear back. No, sadly.
Well, you don't... Yeah. I mean...
Don't have any sway these days.
Yeah, you should have not emailed them 5 minutes before we started recording.
No, I did it about 5 days ago. I got excited about it, and then
they can maybe come on a future episode and just answer questions about some other random subject.
I sent them all my game ideas and asked if they would have an idea. Do these have any sway?
I think the problem is like they probably don't translate as well when it's written down. Like it needs to be
the subject line was just Fartin and Tartan ?
Fartin and Tartan. There's one guy, he seems to be predominantly about, he's American, and he seems to be predominantly about weightlifting, and like he's the world's strongest man, but he was like 2 or 3 times world Highland Games champion. His name's Matt Vincent. He's on a bunch of podcasts, and he just does like random episodes of other, like, tends to be like fitness podcasts, but he went to LSU. I don't know exactly where he's born, but he's got this very like drawl American accent. And he's like, yeah, well, you know, I used to be able to throw, but I was pretty average at throwing. So then I just turned up to these Highland Game events and I started throwing and I was pretty good at that. And I was just like, it was again, he was just another like lovely man with a very nice accent. It just wasn't a Highland accent, but he was just very pleasant.
Hey, you do you.
Yeah. Anyway, I think I'm done. I think I've told everything I could tell about the Highland Games. It's a fairly broad overview. Chris, have you got any other brilliant games or event ideas that you want to share with us?
No, I gave up all my game ideas, but I would love to go to one of the biggies in the States. I think the Americans obviously always do it a bit better than the Brits when it comes to pomp. And I think
bigger. I would say bigger.
I think that'd be a fun weekend to go to one of the biggies, North Carolina or California or whatever. I mean, there's so many of them. Canada as well.
Canada's massive.
Yeah, it'd be great fun, I'm sure, and especially when you realise that we'd be the only actual real Scottish people there, as opposed to
maybe that can be our first off-site podcast.
Maybe
live from.
Yeah.
Live from, I love it. Johnny, what about you? Any other thoughts?
No, I mean, even in that, there's like 5 other bits of it that I'm kind of interested to get into. So, yeah, it's been good.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess I'll see you guys this weekend. We'll start throwing some big things around, get into training for next year, and we'll turn up to North Carolina and just dominate. Is that what we're saying?
As I've said, I've got the weight already with a 22-pound child, so I'm throwing him around, and
yeah,
I think
you're halfway there.
Watch this space. Basically.
Well, Johnny, then you take up the pipes. I'm going to take up the dancing. Chris, you can do the heavies. Together, we'll just dominate the events. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. All right, this will do that. Fuck it.
That's it. That's the end.
Let's do that one more time. All right, this will do, lads. This will do nicely. Thanks for listening, everybody. Just a couple more things. Please don't forget to subscribe and review the podcast on iTunes and Spotify and all other podcasting apps. You can email us at thistledonicelypod@gmail.com. Visit the website, thistledonicelypod.com. Visit us on Twitter at thistledopod. All original music in this podcast is written and performed by our very own Johnny Naismith. Please like and subscribe to his YouTube channel and follow him on Instagram at JAW_KNEE_. Loves, hugs, and kisses from the Thistle